That I wanted you to think about what has happened in your life. Do you have any regrets in your life? Regrets. Everybody has regrets. I almost put this one up here. There's a guy that he went and got a tattoo and he wanted no regrets on it, and they misspelled it, no regrets. And I always wonder if he regretted that. And regrets come in two flavors. You do know that, don't you? Sometimes they come in the flavor of what I did, I wish I wouldn't have done. For instance, I said that ugly thing to that person, I wish I wouldn't have said that. That's one of those. The second part, though, the second kind is the things I wish I had done but didn't. That's the road less traveled. And it comes down, it's kind of like this when people say, I wish I would have called them before they died. That's the same that's the regret. And there are a lot of people who say, I think I ought to call somebody, but I haven't called them in a long time, and I probably would be, they'd be offended or whatever, and everybody finds out that, no, they're not offended. They're glad that you called them, so whatever you have to do now. But those are regrets, but the problem with regrets is it brings up your conscience. Paul in 1 Timothy chapter 4, he talks about those who are hypocritical liars, and their consciences have been seared like a hot iron. Now, he talks about the conscience that way. We're going to talk about conscience today. The conscience is seared like a hot iron. What happens when you get burned badly? It hurts. Yeah, it has no sensation. I had a friend of mine in high school who he had been burned on the back of his hand. He had a big old scar on the back of his hand. And he had this trick he did. He'd take a needle and he'd poke it in his hand and let it sit there. He couldn't feel a thing right there. I mean, not a sensation at all. And everybody else cringes, but he didn't bother him any because it had been damaged so badly. We're going to talk about consciences that have been seared with hot iron, but in terms of, we got to get some terms together, I suppose. What is conscience? How would you describe it? How would you define it? So conscience is one of those things. It's a dictionaries define it as kind of an inner sense of. We could call it a compass that points you in the right direction. It tells you when you're getting off track. It describes when you're about to do wrong, or when you do, it alerts you that you have violated something that is inside of you that's very important. We've always tried to portray it. Disney, the way he tried to portray it was in the movie Pinocchio. Pinocchio has a conscience in the form of Jiminy Cricket. And Jiminy Cricket is always trying to tell him to be truthful, which he sometimes doesn't. When that happens, everything goes away. Conscience is that way. Now, how do you damage your conscience? Well, okay, keep doing it over and over and over and over again, and you'll finally smash it together. A conscience is kind of like a warning light on your dashboard. My daughter had a friend in high school who had a Honda Accord that her father was letting her use, and one day the oil pressure light came on, and she just kept driving it and driving it and driving it until finally the car just stopped. And her father said to her, "Why did you do that?" She said, "Well, I didn't think it was that important." You see, that's the problem, is that when you keep doing and doing and doing, it finally says, fine, I must not be important. It goes away. And so conscience can be damaged, as we're going to see today. Really what conscience is, it can become when it's damaged, people bury what they did. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want to think about it. They want to put that in the past, thinking no one will ever know if this happens. That this took place, and it'll all go away, and I'll feel much better. The problem is it comes back to haunt you at the worst possible time. And that's what we're going to find out about Joseph's brothers, for instance. How do you bring it back to life? And that's part of what Joseph does with his brothers, is trying to reactivate something that has been long dormant in their lives. And so to start, you have to, meanwhile, back at the ranch, as they say in the Westerns, something's happening. There's parallel action in the book of Genesis, some of which we don't ever see. We can only kind of ascertain. For instance, we all know about what has happened to Joseph. This has been what we have talked about since day one in here. Joseph had a happy life back in Canaan, and then he is sold into slavery, put into prison. At the age of 30, he becomes the prime minister. He tells that there's going to be 7 years of good, followed by 7 years of famine. All of that happened. It's all detailed. We looked at all of that last week. However, there are two other tracks. There's a track called What God is Doing. You don't really know what God is doing. And you say, well, we know. That's because you read the rest of the story. But Joseph doesn't know what God is doing. He's having to trust God because he doesn't know. If you know, you don't trust. And so God is working at a very high level to accomplish some things. And when we get to the end of the book of Genesis, we're going to talk about God's true purposes in all of this. But on another level, back in Canaan, you've got Jacob and his sons, now 11. And in all of the time we have looked at, last time we saw Jacob's sons was Genesis chapter 39. So now we have moved away from them. And so there has been nothing but silence. You don't know what's going on. You don't know how they're feeling. You don't know what they're doing. Their day-to-day is not described. The big things in their life is not described. You don't know what has happened. Now remember something. We're skipping through 23 years. And we haven't heard a thing about Joseph's sons, Jacob's sons, rather. We haven't heard a word about them. Until we come to the point where they begin to reappear, which is in chapter 42 that we're going to look at. Suddenly you begin to see them again. What happens in those 23 years? What's taking place? It takes place of this. And so we find out that the famine has come. It has hit very, very severely. In Genesis chapter 41 at the end, it talks about the famine. The famine began, and there was famine in all the other lands as well. It was not localized. This was not just Egypt. This was just not a local drought that has caused this problem. This is area-wide. And it says the famine spread over the whole country. It wasn't just in one place. It was the whole country of Egypt. And the famine was severe throughout Egypt. And it says, and the famine was severe everywhere. You hear that drumbeat as it picks up. You have this famine. It's happening. Now it's spreading. Now it's bad. Now it's getting severe. Now it's everywhere severe. There's this picture being painted of what the world looks like at that time. Now Joseph is approaching 40 years of age as we start this lesson. Let me give you a little math that I used at least to get there. He's 17. We're told he's 17 when he is sold by his brothers. We know that he's 30 when he becomes prime minister because it tells us that. So there was this period of 13 years between him being sold into slavery and him becoming prime minister. He spent a lot of time in prison, by the way. We sometimes pass that off as a few weeks. I mean, it just kind of passes quickly. It was 13 years in that terrible time. And then there's a 7 years of plenty. He'd been 37. And then for the famine to get severe enough for it to be felt completely, probably took 2 to 3 years. So it doesn't say he's 40, but this is kind of what it's like. He's approaching 40 at least. It's first thing we're going to look at today is called hunger. Hunger sweeps throughout the land. And we go back to Jacob again. See, now we're back to Jacob and his family. We haven't been with Jacob and his family for a while. Now suddenly, Jacob and his family. It says that Jacob had discovered that there was food in Egypt. I like the way this puts. He kicks his sons in the seat of the pants. So, what in the world are you doing? Just sitting there looking at each other while we die? Get up and go get us something to eat. But it says, so they went, but Joseph's brother Benjamin was left behind. Important part of this story. So they were among the throngs that went to buy grain. And you can just imagine the thousands of people struggling to get just enough to eat. And here are 10 men who are just one of many, it seems like. Now, do you think the brothers expected to see Joseph when they got there? Why not? He's in Egypt, isn't he? Okay, they had no clue. Okay, he probably is dead by now. And yeah, and they may have suspected he never got to Egypt, or he went farther than Egypt, or any number of things. Just think about he was a 17-year-old boy who had been pampered all his life, and now you throw him into that. How do you think that's going to work out? See, there's assumptions being made here. Now, the second scene is a door that is opening that we're going to look at. They come to Egypt, and it says that when they got there, they bowed their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them. But he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. Why do you think Joseph acted that way? Do you think, this is an interesting question I hadn't thought about much. Do you think Joseph expected to see his brothers again? So you think he was surprised, huh? But he seemed to be very content with doing what he's doing. He pretends to be a stranger. He doesn't need them to know who he is yet. Part of this, I think, there is a part of this that I think he has played out, says, how can I make this right again? There's a reason for that. If he's at 40, just remember, he's 40. There's an interesting idea. Let me give you a thing. When you get to certain ages, you start reflecting. Do you realize that the birthdays that end in 9 are the most significant birthdays you have? You may not have thought about that. It is. When somebody comes to be 29, I love it when they go, I'm 29. I'm going, thank you. I appreciate that. 29. All of a sudden they go, I'm not young anymore. I don't know what to do. I've got, is there a ring? Great. They don't start going through all kinds of stuff like that. Well, then 39 is even worse. In 39 they go, I don't think I can get another promotion. I can't make any more money. I've got these kids growing up. We got college. I don't know what we're going to do. They're evaluating their life. Where's it headed? Where's it going? You get to 49 and it is far worse. At 49 you go, oh, midlife. Let's buy the sports car. I do know a lot of men when they turn about 49, that's what they do. And but the other thing that happens is when people turn 49, there are more people who are 49 that run their first marathon than any other age group, because they want to say before they get old and crippled, I ran a marathon. You start missing out the things of life. And so when you think about this, Joseph may have spent a pretty good measure of his thinking time. Said, if I met my brothers again, how could I mend my family relationships? Not a bad thing to think about on your birthday, by the way. But apparently he's been thinking about this some. And he's got some sort of a plan to do this. And so it says that although he recognized his brothers, they didn't recognize him. Why didn't they? If he could recognize them, why couldn't they recognize him? Pardon? He's out of place. Out of place is important. You realize that when you put people in other contexts, you don't recognize them as well? That's happened to, yeah, he's gotten different too. That's several things changed in his appearance. Number one, he's 40. Nobody at 40 looks like they were at 17. And, if there's a truism at all, that's it. What's that? He might have been. The Egyptians also were clean shaven. The Canaanites were not. You've seen people shave off a beard, and you go, who are they? One time my wife, and our first child was born, the baby loved to play with my wife's long hair. She decided she'd had enough of having her hair pulled by the baby, so we lived in Georgetown at that time, we went to Austin. She goes to the beauty shop, and she has it cut to here. I'm keeping the baby outside. She walks out of there and holds her up. The baby screams bloody murder. There's a stranger. It took forever. Man, I thought, well, with 6 months old, we traumatized the kid for life. All over hair. But that's not what happened. She got over it. But it's interesting. Appearances change. Things change. Concepts change. He's dressed in a robe, fine robe. He's got chains around his neck. He probably has some sort of a headdress. He speaks fluent Egyptian. All these things, he's out of place even. Mention that if you're out of place. I remember one time, years ago, in one of the churches, we used to mail our bulletin on Wednesday, so I prepared the bulletin to get it mailed on Wednesday so I get there on Friday. And we did that a long time. That's before email, that's for sure. And so I took it in. There's a lady that always helped me at the counter at the post office. And every week, same lady. We talked about things. And then one day I went to a wedding. And there's this woman across the room. I'm going, I know her somewhere. Where do I know? Now, if you want to ruin your day, there's the earworm to get it. I've seen that lady. Who is she? I don't understand. Where is this going? And you go through this shenanigans. And all of a sudden, when I got home, I realized that's the lady from the post office I see every Wednesday. You don't always see things that you think you see. And so it says that they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. That's a significant idea, because the next thing it says, and he remembered. He remembered his dreams about them. When you go back to the story in Genesis chapter 37, Joseph has two dreams. Dream number one is the sheaves. And as the sheaves are there, notice though, he's right here. I'm going to help you. I promise I will edit this off the tape. Just a minute. No, there he is. Okay. You're welcome. I knew you were puzzled. But he's bowing down. The sheaves are there. And it says there were his sheaf plus his brother's sheaves and mothers and fathers, and they all bowed down to it. Then later on, he has another one about the sun, moon, and stars. And the 11 stars were bowing down to me. The same words, same idea. Now here it is, a dream of so many years before is coming to fruition. And so he says to them, I think you're spies. Why do you think he accuses them of being spies? Set them on that. Keep them off of a story. This is a place where you clarify motives real fast. When you accuse somebody of something they can die for, they're going to come clean. And so they say, your servants were 12 brothers, the sons of one man who lives in the land of Canaan. The youngest is now with our father, and one is no more. After all these years, what do you think they had? What do you think they thought happened to Joseph? He's gone. He's no more. He's gone. They don't say he's dead, but they don't know. He's gone. He'll never be seen again. Nobody will see him. I don't know where he is. He used to be, but he's gone. And so Joseph doesn't factor into their picture, except now they have to think about Joseph. They'll have to say what they needed to say a long time. He's now gone. And that sets up trial by fire. So Joseph says to them, he says, you will be tested. You will not leave this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Now he knows the situation. He knows his father's not going to let his youngest brother, Benjamin, come. He knows that. But he's testing them. What can you do? And so he says, I'll send one of you back. He can bring him out, but the rest of you are going to prison until he gets back. And if he doesn't come back, you know where you're going to be. So he put them all in custody for 3 days. Let me offer a guess. This is just a guess on my part. I think they were probably put in the same prison that Joseph had been in. He gives them a taste of their own medicine. You want to experience what I've had to experience? I'll let you taste it. I'll let you feel it. I'll let you be in that dark dungeon for 3 days and see how you like it. What do you think that accomplished in them? Okay, it humbles them, that's for sure. What happens when you go through an experience you didn't think you'd ever have, but other people have? Okay, it creates compassion and empathy. Now suddenly you are different because you feel that. It's not intellectual. I feel it. This must have been how Joseph must have felt. They're going to find that out. This must be how Joseph felt. Until you can have that kind of feeling inside it, change is not possible. And so he reveals one thing to them that they need to understand. I fear God. And if you're honest, I'll let you go. But if you're not, I'll bring down vengeance. And so he says, this is who I am, this is what I believe. And then suddenly there's this discussion. Remember, Joseph is pretending he can't understand things. He's using an interpreter, but he understands perfectly. They said to one another, surely we are being punished because of our brother. We saw how distressed he was when he pleaded with us for his life, but we wouldn't listen. That's why this distress has come upon us. But Reuben said, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you wouldn't listen. Now we're going to have to give accounting for his blood. Notice what it says. It says, now we have to face the fact of what we did. We really did this. We sat there, we listened to the cries of a boy who's pleading for help, pleading that we don't kill him, and yet we didn't listen. Now the depth and despair of Joseph becomes their depth and despair at the same time. And suddenly this break happens. He turns aside, he begins to weep. Why do you think he weeps? It's overwhelming. What's overwhelming about it? Okay, what he's been through? Yeah. Now he realized, now he's finding what he's done, he's rekindled something inside of him. And now they've expressed it, he can feel the same way. I'm glad you see that. It's interesting, what I think he's weeping for, he's now compassionate for them. This is a story that could have had a different ending at this point. He could have brought out the sword here. But instead he brings out the tears. Because he's now compassionate about people who have done the worst to him. And it says, but he came back to them and said, spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken and bound before their eyes. They got to see what was going to happen to them if the things did not work out right. The scene 4 is fear mixed with grace. Joseph sends them back, minus Simeon, and he gives them enough for their travels so that they don't starve to death on the way. And he packs up their sacks with grain that they've come to pay for. But he has his servants take the money they brought and put it back in the sack. In other words, he's given them the grain. And they get back home, they open those sacks, and they find their silver, and they just know what's going to happen. And Jacob I don't know what he's feeling. Anger, hurt, fear, because he says, everything's against me. He said, Joseph is no more, now Simeon is no more. And you want to take Benjamin so he can become no more? That's kind of what he's hinting at. And so he doesn't want to do that. They emphasize, though, there was a man who was Lord over us. That's an instructive idea, because now Joseph is the Lord over them. They were the Lord over him for so many years. Now he controlled their life and death in the balance at that point. And so Jacob is just heartbroken. I don't know. I don't want to lose any more of my family. He's losing them one by one. There's great sorrow there. But then Reuben, of all people, he steps up and he says, you may put both of my sons to death if I don't bring him back to you. Entrust him to my care and I'll bring him back. Now, Reuben has an interesting role to play in this story. The role he plays is there are three things that happen. One, he's not the best person. He's not the best person. After all, when we first meet Reuben, he's the oldest son, but he commits incest with one of his father's wives. And he doesn't seem to care. He's gone through this cavalier sense of life. But then suddenly you get down to where they're about to kill Joseph, and he's the one that intervened and said, let's not kill him, and let's just put him here while we have to go do our things. And he was going to come back and let him go. Something was changing inside of Reuben. Then finally we get to this part of this passage, and he says to his brothers, he said, we have sinned against the boy. He's the first to confess. He's confessing for everybody. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. God's going to hold us all responsible, including me. Reuben may have felt like he could have done more. This may be the regret coming out in his life. But he says, you may put my sons to death if I don't bring you back. I'm willing to pay the ultimate price if I have to. We'll go to the mat to take care of this. Reuben's interesting because he despised his father, he hated his brother, but now he's changing. So how do you repair a conscience? That's what this is all about. First thing is you have to face what you did and what you've become. Now, the reason we have something called confession of sin is right here. If you don't say what you did, mean that you did it, and are willing to face it in a very specific way, let me tell you, repentance can be false repentance. Here's how false repentance sounds. I'm sorry you took that the wrong way. Really? You're confessing for me. I'm sorry that someone got offended by me being honest. Really? That's confession? No. It comes out like this. This is what I did. I am sorry for what I did. I did this thing. I know what I did and I shouldn't have done it. That's called confession. And the first road back to conscience is to get your confession straight. Here's what they say. We're being punished. They believe it. This distress has come upon us. And we have to give an accounting for his blood. They now understand what they've done. They feel it, they sense it, they know it. Secondly, you have to face the effects of your sin. What did it do to somebody else? not just what's doing to you, it's what you're doing to somebody else. They said, surely we have been punished because of our brother. We saw his distress. We heard his cries. We would not listen. They now know what happened to Joseph in that situation. There's a silent echo here. I'm going to go back to that. There's a silent echo here. Something that's been talking to them in the back of their minds they haven't thought about. There's a short story by Edgar Allan Poe called The Telltale Heart. Poe was darkened, to say the least. And in the story, there's a man who kills another and hides his body under the house that he lives in, thinking that no one will ever find out what he did. And so he's very content that he has gotten away with the perfect crime. And then he lays down at night. And he hears a sound, thump, 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 thump. He awakes and starts thinking the man is not dead, and he's alive under the house, and he's going to come out and get revenge. He tries to sleep again. Thump, 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 thump. Finally, it becomes so terrible, he kills himself. The sound of the heart that he was hearing was his own. He was ignoring what his heart was telling him. That's what was happening here. Suddenly, they begin to hear the beating of their own hearts. A silent echo of what they've done. And then they find the right way. And that is, I will do what it takes. I will pay whatever price is necessary to make this happen. Entrust Benjamin to my care, and I'll bring him back. He goes one step. He'll be willing to sacrifice everything he has to do the right things. And the only way to really repair a conscience is to start doing the right things again and turn away from wrong. The reason we got in our mess here is because they ignored what was right and wrong, and they did the wrong things. The only way they can get back is to start doing the right things. And so that's where we're going to begin again next week. Next week, we get to hear Jacob's heart as he grieves over so many things.